Good morning and welcome to Behind the Screen. I am JM. This is a show where we just sit around and talk about games, game design, campaign design, things that we love. And I am really glad to be here on Tuesday morning talking with you about games. Padre, thanks. We actually did run a Savage Worlds game on Friday night with John Doom, who's in the chat, Chris from Peg, JD, and Tank the Frank, somebody who's shown up a lot on our streams during the horror at Headstone Hill. It was a lot of fun. We got some Savage Rifting in, and I think I may have to run a part 3 at some point because that was a lot of fun. So we've said this year on Iconic Production that we're going to be talking a lot about campaign and setting design. We're going to be looking at the Valley of Troicus, which is this area of the Jackal's world, which is a Bronze Age fantasy setting that I love. But we're also going to be starting up a new game and a new stream in March with people here in the studio. We're going to be showing off Foundry. We're going to be doing some Savage Worlding. And you know what? I thought that we would kind of bounce back and forth between the setting design for the Valley of Troicus as a hex crawl, as a old school style inspired pushing back of chaos, establishing the keep, if you will, on the borderlands of the Zaharets, and talking about the new setting that I'm building for our stream for Savage Worlds. And I thought that would be a fun thing to kind of bounce back and forth. So this week we're going to look at Savage Worlds. We're going to talk a lot about Savage Worlds. You might see that I'm very excited about Savage Worlds. There's just a lot going on, a lot about the system I like. Tonight we're actually going to be starting a 2-part episode of Deadlands that we're going to run through and enjoy for the next 3 weeks. We're taking next week off because of something. I'm surprised how religious everyone in my group is. They all want to take the Feast of Saint Valentine off and spend it with their loved ones. So who am I to argue that? I may do a small stream. Maybe we'll do some more setting design next Tuesday night, do a long form setting design. Professor, thank you for jumping in, and thank you for subscribing. And yes, it is always fun. JD is one of my favorite people to play games with. If there was one downside to starting Iconic Production all those years ago, was that JD stepped into the producer role and we just couldn't get her. She couldn't produce and play as often as I would have liked her to. So having her in full dog boy costume as Duke Fitzsimmons was just amazing. Yes, Rook, you did hear. We're going to be running a Deadlands adventure tonight. Should be a lot of fun. I want to bring in... I haven't quite come up with the title yet, but it definitely will have to do with witches in the West. So maybe they will be wicked. I think there's something in pop culture I can reference there. So for the new Savage World campaign that we're going to be starting, I thought I'd lay out the general themes, backgrounds, things that I'm pulling from, kind of like we did with our look at the different genres of fantasy, because that seemed to work out really well. So we're going to start with kind of the influences for the new Savage setting that we're going to play in. Then on Thursday, we're going to look at the setting rules that I'm cobbling together to make this game feel unique. Now, we are also talking about, once I get the main setting document put together, which will go out to the Iconic patrons, we're going to get the crew in the studio, and I'm going to let them speak into the setting, make changes, add NPCs, help me flesh out some of the things. So we're just building a bare bones thing here. And then we're going to release an edited version of that so you guys can kind of see the campaign overview from the player's point of view, which I am excited about. Ooh, Something Wicked This Way Comes is one of my favorite Ray Bradbury stories, Rook. That is just great. Hey, Restart, good to see you. So, what is going on with the new setting? Well, I kind of come up with the idea of an Arcano-punk setting. So take some of the tropes that I love from Cyber and Diesel Punk, but mix it with sort of an arcane flavor and feel. Not Shadowrun, not a bunch of high tech, or as I believe it was Gibson said, the bastardized DNA of his world and Tolkien's. Don't get me wrong, I love Shadowrun, but it's a very succinct way of describing it. So we're going to be playing in something that we're kicking around titles for, but I'm currently calling it The City and the Tower in my mind. It is going to be a city-based fantasy campaign that we won't leave the city very often. In fact, there are very few ways of leaving the city, because let's talk about some of the influences. So anyway, the players will be in the city. They will be dealing with factions in the city who are using them in the way that mega corporations use runners. That the people who are employed by the factions of the cities are the only ones who actually have a chance and a way of affecting the metaphysical principles of reality. And so one of my big influences of this setting is going to be the Dark Tower and Planescape. So the Dark Tower influences kind of the tower portion of this campaign setting. The idea being that this is the center of reality. This is the one true place of reality in which, like Zelazny's Chronicles of Amber, everything else is just an echo or a shadow of. The tower sits in the center of the city. It has been there since the dawn of time, possibly even predating the dawn of time. And the city has kind of accreted around it. The original holders of the city were, of course, the elemental lords. And as creation kind of developed and interacted, the elemental lords lost control of the city to the fiends, the celestials, the primordial dragons. And then shadows started appearing. And shadows are people who are from the main realities, the realities like you and I would be from. And they get drawn here to the city and are then used by these factions who don't want to destroy creation, they want to rule it. So Dark Tower influence is probably fairly obvious, the Dark Tower kind of being at the center of the multiverse, holding back chaos. I have a great villain from several great villains, but if the group ever gets involved in what I would consider a very ill-conceived meta plot, there is going to be things much like the Prim in the Dark Tower, who seek to get back into creation and reduce it to the chaos that came before. John Doom gets a Benny for that joke that reminds me of a Bulgarian joke where the main character is told to watch his mouth, and he says it is impossible to watch one's mouth without looking very silly because you have to stick your lips out so far. So that's the Dark Tower. Planescape, because I'm in love with Sigil. I'm in love with the Lady of Pain. I love this idea of a city where not only is it connected to everywhere, but it seems to be more important than everywhere. It's at the center of things. And that here is where the intellectual and philosophical ideas of reality are fought in wars in the streets. Another influence, which may be a little bit more obscure, is the Peter David comic Fallen Angel. If you've ever read Fallen Angel, there's the city there, the city of Bete Noire. And I don't really want to go into why that's an influence, but if you've never read... Thanks, John. This is... my wife got me this shirt. It's just a wonderful... you can't read the bottom. It says, he is very uncomfortable. So yeah, these are concepts that we're going to be working on. There's going to be the idea of the shadows as the people who can actually influence the reality. There are things trying to war for control of the city. The Celestial and the Fiends, the Dead, the Elemental Lords, the bastard children of the Elemental Lords, sort of these para-elemental factions that are springing up in the city. The dragons who are going to operate as the police force of the city because, well, they're on top of everything. They're aloof, they're above everything, but you know what? They'll make sure that the peace is kept. When we get into setting rules and mechanics, we're going to have this thing of, there's going to be single-shot firearms, things like that. But for the most part, I want to keep it pretty fantastical with just a little bit of hint of arcane firearms. The thing is, we're not using arcane to replace technology one for one. What I want is something unique, something that undergirds the city. You're in this place of power. You have the elemental lords right there. We're going to push that kind of forward. A couple of the other influences, Gareth Ryder Hanrahan wrote a series of books, and we're going to take our cue on paladins, or as we're calling them, conduits, in the fact that they're going to be almost voodooan in nature. If you are the champion of a god, you may not always have had the choice. Your soul was just open enough that a god could, forcibly take control. And so when we get to setting rules, I'm going to adapt the Harrowed rules for anyone playing a champion in this game, or a conduit, in the fact that you can open your soul conduit a little bit wider, but it risks the god soul riding you for a bit. Restart, that's a good reference. I love Logan's Run. The other thing that I'm going to be playing with is a setting rule that I'll discuss on Thursday, where most people aren't aware, but I think the tower and the city are going to have a sentience of their own. And that the tower and the city will empower shadows for their own ends, as enigmatic and strange as they are. And that the more you lean into sort of the archetype or the iconic ideal that the tower or in the city force upon you, the more you lose yourself, but the more powerful you get, until you become sort of the avatar of this icon and then disappear to have that mantle fall on someone else. So we are I'm going to be playing a lot with this idea. We're going to talk a lot about it over, I think we may do less of Jackals just over February and March, because we're spinning up the campaign in March. And this kind of helps me chat with you guys, bounce ideas off you guys, see what's cool. But also, part of behind the screen has always been to kind of take the screen and move it away and show kind of my process. I've had a lot of people ask me, how do you develop settings? How do you write adventures? How do you get started in the role-playing game industry? This is how I did it. I started by writing things for 13th Age and doing the 13th Age fan podcast. And you know what? I don't need this because I'm not actually listening to anything. That is what opened doors. For most companies, they want to see what their fans can do. And most companies have a fairly generous fan use policy. If you want to get in with Pelgrane, write some stuff for 13th Sage column and submit it. Write something for Page XX for Gumshoe. If you want to get involved with Savage Worlds, start putting some free stuff up, or putting some stuff up on the Swag Guild so that people can see what you're doing. It's not so much about getting a lucky break as it is about doing stuff like this, sharing your process, seeing what you're doing, developing something that can go out and be seen. And you know what? It's a lot scarier in some ways, but also a lot more freeing. So we're going to develop the setting over the course of February. Then we're going to release the final version of the setting guide where all of the players have had input. And then we will be starting that in March, but not before we get through our 2-part Deadlands. Restar has a great character. Everybody's picked out their archetypes. I am ready to run this game. I know both Bens are very excited about playing some Savage Worlds. So we'll play this Tuesday night. We'll do a setting design next Tuesday night, and then finish up the Deadlands adventure. And then after that, we're going to run a 2-part Pan Pacifica Torg adventure for the brand new for the release of the Pan Pacifica PDFs, and I am very excited for that as well. So we've got a couple of weeks to hammer out the setting and get it fleshed out before we go forward. So Thursday we're going to talk about the setting rules, because here's the thing. Savage Worlds is a wonderful system. It can do just about anything well. Fantasy companion, horror companion, superhero companion. We're going to see the sci-fi companion hopefully someday. But the problem with generic settings is usually getting the feel, or the generic systems is getting the feel of the setting across in a generic system. I love GURPS. I mean, I love GURPS. I ran GURPS for a very long time. But eventually, if you've run enough GURPS, you realize, hey, the only real dials that I have to play with are, do I allow technology and what tech level or not? Do I allow magic? Do I allow psionics? Do I allow supers? What skills do I allow? It doesn't really convey the setting. That really largely falls on the GM to kind of convey it. Sort of like with Torg. Using the Cosm cards and the world laws now really convey the setting of the Cosm you are in. But Savage Worlds looked at that and said, okay, but we can do that one better. And that's where setting rules come in. We'll go over setting rules again in what they are on Thursday. But setting rules set the dials for the setting you're playing in. Is it gritty damage? Is it mega damage? Are you born a hero or are you not? Do you want to increase some things and decrease others? Do you want magic to feel different? We're going to go through all the setting rules I'm considering for this new campaign. And I think what we'll actually end up doing is farming out the campaign title to the patrons and to the chat. We'll gather some, as you guys get a feel for the setting. If you guys want to put out ideas for what we're going to call the setting, let me know, and then we'll put it up for a poll on the Iconic Patron Discord. I think that would be a lot of fun to do. So that is what we're going to be building. We're going to be building a Savage setting, and then you're going to get to see the players engage with it. You're going to get to see the players playing it. We'll be continuing our bennies from the chat for various things. Speaking of, mad props to Chris, who played our crazy in the Savage Rifts campaign, and to Rookcat for being the voices in his head. This was a ton of fun. Chris's character had a hindrance where he heard a lot of voices, and he just decided the chat were the voices in his head. And so he reacted to situations based off the chat. Ooh. Anarchy in the Arcana. I'm going to write that one down, John. Already off the bat. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be discussing, well, don't worry, we're going to get to Jackals. We got a couple of reviews coming in, but I thought this would be a fun thing, especially on the build up to the new campaign. Also, just to kind of discuss something we discussed last time that Bob said he would really like to see in Padre. For the 100th episode, we're going to be talking about beauty in gaming. What does that mean? What is that? How does that look? Why is it important? Why is gaming, or why do I think gaming is important? Luckily for me, I have that paper written. Literally, there's a book coming out that should be crowdfunding here soon. A little bit of crowdfunding to do the print run, the cover, and the editing, of which I submitted a article for. And my article is on sort of role-playing as narrative beauty and narrative liturgy. Ben, who plays Kowalski in the tour game is I wrote a paper on superheroes as the American icons, American saints, which is just a fascinating topic as well. So I feel uniquely prepared to speak on that. And when we talk about beauty, I don't just mean like, man, Holler is a beautiful book, or Savage Worlds has great art, or man, anything from Free League is just freaking gorgeous. I mean that in sort of the old classical three immutable components of reality. And that we used to believe that we had three absolutes: truth, goodness, and beauty. And part of the problem is that we've allowed one of those absolutes to become subjective. And what does that do to us? So I'm going to talk about truth and beauty and goodness and how they all sort of come together in the role-playing experience. And I think that's why it can be a moment of, quote, one of my favorite episodes of Babylon 5, a moment of perfect beauty. So that's what we're going to be talking about on the 100th episode. But on Thursday, we're going to talk about setting rules and why they're so important, and why, no matter what game you're playing, consider using setting rules, right? If you're playing 5th edition, go check out the DMG. There's a ton of setting rules. They just call them by something else. Allow you to tweak everything a little bit. Sanity, honor, gritty healing. These are all things that you can use. They're tools in our toolbox that sometimes we don't even think about picking up and using. I'm going to look at it from building a Savage setting, but we're going to talk about using it for our games going forward. So, until then, thanks to everybody in the chat. John Doom. A nod to the Sex Pistols. Arkany. Love it. Rook, Restar, Tinker Hellraiser. Good to see you on here. Padre. I think I said hello to everyone. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. I will see you all tonight for Deadlands. And on Thursday for discussing the setting rules of our new Savage setting. So until then, everyone, have a good one. Bye.